Welcome to our presentation, Partnering with the Community to Help Students Transition. This began as a pilot project from Carli Wright, one of our presenters today, who, as a school librarian, created a field trip for students in order to teach them about their community through the lens of an adult. When presented with this idea, other members of the high school to college committee brainstormed and found ways we could help all these students, regardless of where they intended to go after high school. What you'll hear and see today is the culmination of these ideas. Please note, we could easily break each one of these sections into its own full-length presentation. However, today you'll get ideas for your own libraries to see how to better serve the needs of children and young adults to better prepare them for adulthood. Next.
The transition from a childhood to adulthood in modern United States is difficult. I think we can all agree on that. Things are changing rapidly, and to help our young people adapt and thrive in our difficult environment, we librarians need to partner together to help connect our youth to the larger community. This presentation is broken up into 3 sections, each having to do with an aspect of what it means to be an adult in our modern world and how we can support young people in this transition. These 3 sections will not cover all of what it means to be an adult. If we did that, we'd be here all day, but very important concepts that everyone needs to keep in mind when they step out into the wider world. First part of being an adult is being on your own doesn't mean being alone. The transition from high school to adulthood can be a very isolating experience in a young person's life. We librarians need to let young people know that there are community supports available that can assist them and social activities they can participate in. The second part of being an adult is learning to be self-sufficient. While the community is available to support our youth, it is important that they learn the necessary skills to care for themselves, especially in terms of their physical and mental health. And finally, being an adult means recognizing your responsibility to others. They say you know you're an adult when you see a problem, look around for a grown-up to help solve it, and realize the grown-up is you. The current generation of young people is very socially engaged and very eager to use their new adulthood to tackle the difficult issues of the day. However, many struggle to know where to start making a positive impact in their community. We can help them by providing them with information and tools to help resolve current issues and improve their communities. Next.
Ultimately, the idea here is to show how all libraries can work together and be a collaborative community. Not all students will go to college. Many will go into the workforce, military, or move into a new community. The goal is to show you all how making sure your library is the hub of information for all members of the community can better serve all patrons with their various needs. And hopefully you'll learn what some of these are. We always like to think we know what our students need, but even while putting this presentation together, it showed us we were all thinking specifically of our own libraries and not considering what other types of libraries can offer or assist with. Additionally, maybe we can learn how the libraries can work together to better help all our patrons. Next.
All of the presenters are a part of the high school to college committee for WNYLRC. I'm Carli Wright, a school library media specialist and special ed teacher at Randolph Middle School High School in Randolph, New York.
I'm Amy Rockwell, first-year experience librarian at Buffalo State College.
I'm Dani Newman, currently a school library media specialist for Cattaraugus, Allegany, BOCES, although I just left Fillmore Central School District.
My name is Allison. I'm a part-time collections librarian at SUNY Erie Community College and a part-time weekend supervisor librarian at Daemen College.
And we have Maria Lowe from Buffalo and Erie.
I forgot to unmute myself.
Oh, go ahead, Maria.
I'm Maria Lowe. I'm the Teen Services and Outreach Librarian here at the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library at our central library building.
Being on your own doesn't mean being alone. This is our first section. Teenagers often assume when you become an adult, you just know things. Now, those of us who are adults already have figured out, I hope, that this isn't really true. There will always be things you need assistance on and things you can't do on your own. Being an adult means recognizing when and how to ask for assistance. We as librarians can help young people by providing them with information and letting them know about important community supports that will allow them to do everything from cashing their first paycheck to getting a dog license. Next.
I have the unique experience of returning to teach in the community where I live and grew up. I have always felt a strong connection to the public library, still being taken back to my childhood from the smell of the foyer at the Randolph Public Library. As a special education teacher, I became very involved and aware of the transition needed between high school and life as an adult. When I became the librarian, I liked to talk to parents, former students, and other teachers and ask what they wished they knew or their child knew before they became adults. There is a common misconception that students should be learning these skills in high school, but not many people realize that from 10th grade on up, the classes vary greatly depending on the path that students choose to take. Some go to college or AP courses. Some take a traditional path, take various electives, or attend BOCES. This makes it impossible for a teacher to lead the charge for teaching adulting skills, but the librarians can fill this gap. That is how I saw my role. I looked around my community and thought how I could reintroduce the seniors to the town where they grew up, but to now experience Randolph as an adult. The class of seniors left on their walking tour of Randolph. We were on a pretty tight schedule because some of the students need to get back to go to BOCES. An agenda helped to keep track of time. Each student received an informational packet, an agenda, a notebook and pen from the credit union, and additional handouts from different locations. Students received information about 6 different places around Randolph: TOPS, the post office, the credit union, insurance company, the public library, and the municipal building. The credit union and the insurance company gave generic information to the students about renters or dorm insurance and about opening a checking account. Another one of the banks in town, when I asked around town, sent 2 people to the school at a different time to talk to the students about credit scores. Groups in the area love to get into the schools, but many will say how hard it is to get an opening into schools. So if you seek out people in your area, they will probably be thrilled to come in and speak. Each informational sheet, which was created for 4 of the locations, each started with the same heading. I'm an adult now, what should I know about? For this stop, it was the municipal building. Also included on the handout was the web address, physical address, a picture of the location. This one shows that there is a foyer in the front of the building that's open 24/7, which contains brochures and information about local places to go in the area, hours of operation, and information that is pertinent to each location. The municipal building is where adults get a dog license, hunting and fishing license, which most of my outdoorsmen already knew, garbage stickers, building permits, and much more. Also, if they want to rent the pavilion at our local park, since graduation was right around the corner, that is something that's done here as well. At the public library, that's me, I did most of the talking, because teenagers can be overwhelming to people who don't work with teens, especially tall 18-year-old men. This stop was so important because the assumption is that libraries are where you check out books. If you're not a reader, why would you go there? I told them that the library has free Wi-Fi, computers, copies, and faxes can be sent here. On this informational sheet, I listed all the libraries in the Chautauqua Cattaraugus library system. I told them how each library is unique in their services. For example, in Kennedy Library, they keep an updated DVD collection. Also, I took them to the basement to show them an area that is free to rent, it has a kitchen, and I shared about the is available to get into local places for free or at a reduced price. For 2 of the locations, TOPS and the post office, I went in and gathered information to share. There was no need to stop at these 2 locations, especially with some time constraints. The postmaster shared how men who are 18 can get their forms to register for selective service. Also, what is the difference between a PO box and home delivery? Should a college student forward their mail? Information about passports. Randolph does not do passports anymore. They have to go to a larger post office like Salamanca or Jamestown. At TOPS, I talked to the woman at the service desk. Some students talk about traveling in other countries once they graduate. They may need to receive money from family through Western Union. Also, paychecks can be cashed in our small TOPS here, but there's a $700 limit. But larger TOPS will cash larger checks. Make sure that you talk to the places in your area. Even TOPS in the post office vary from town to town. I have found that teens are willing to try something new as long as they have a reward at the end. In this case, it was ice cream, at Peaches and Cream across from the school. Things to remember or I would have done differently. Teenagers can be intimidating to people who don't normally work with them. So I would either have a script prepared or even possibly if you do the talking since you're more comfortable, and then let the ladies, for us it was all ladies, jump in. Businesses who have a specific product that competes with others in town, I made sure that I asked them to keep their information generic. I didn't want other companies saying, hey, why didn't they come to us? And I didn't want it to seem like it was a sales pitch. And then also remember, thank you, thank you, thank you. Remember to write those thank you cards or letters. It really means a lot to them.
Okay, so as Carli talked about, when students leave high school, it can be a difficult transition. They can lose access to resources, technology, their community, space, expertise, and this is especially true for youth not going into higher education. But that being said, most people will eventually lose a connection to formal learning environments along the way, right? So this is why it's so important for youth to have an introduction to the resources and services that they'll be able to access throughout adulthood at the public library. Because life is a research project, right? Or at least we hope so. We want people to make informed decisions. So this is where we come in as librarians and educators. Best case scenarios, what Carli was able to do, bring students into the public library. It can be really intimidating. And so it's nice to be introduced to new things when you're with people you're already comfortable with. That being said, it's not always realistic, of course, to bring people to the library. So we are happy to come to you either in person or virtually. And if even that is a barrier, even if you can take students to your local library's website, have them take a look around, show them how you use the library, that can be invaluable. Next. So public library resources, these are what I think of as the traditional library resources. These are the things that people think of when they think of the public library, right? So you've got things like books, library cards, Wi-Fi, computers. And something that I think has been really a positive result of this last pandemic year is that public libraries have had to work really hard to think about how to make their services more accessible. So a couple things that we've done in our library system is that people can now apply for a library card online and have it mailed to them. So they no longer have to come into the building to get their library card. We've also gotten rid of fees for holds, which has made materials more accessible and made it more equitable for our patrons. And the reason that I mention this is because if you have worked with your public library before and you think you know they have what they have to offer, you should talk to them again and see what's new in this past year. You might be surprised. So speaking of library cards and accessibility, if you live in the state of New York, you can apply online for an e-card to the New York Public Library or to the Brooklyn Public Library, which expands your access to digital content. A couple things that I like to mention to youth when I'm talking to them is that we have technology classes and one-on-one sessions for people. So you can book time with a librarian or a tech trainer for the topic of your choice. And this may be thing that teenagers don't think they need now. But give them a couple years down the line, they might be applying for a job. They might need to know something in particular like Excel, and they come to the public library and get some help with that without spending any money. And the last thing I really like to emphasize along these traditional resources is subject guides. People often don't know they exist, but we talk to youth a lot about reliable and accurate information and what that means. So because subject guides are curated by librarians, it helps people with that evaluation piece, right? You still have to determine if that information is right for you and your needs, but we've done part of it for you. You can feel confident that it's reliable information. So these are the sorts of things that, again, teenagers aren't thinking about right now. These are things like personal finance, jobs, taxes, things that they will need help with in life later on. And you don't even have to keep to your own library system. I mean, that's the really great thing about public libraries is that you can access a lot of the information anywhere. All right, next. Okay, non-traditional services. These are some of my favorite things to talk about. So this is our launch pad here at the Central Library in Buffalo. But makerspaces have been around long enough now that people are pretty familiar with them, right? They're in schools, they're in libraries, and each of them are unique. So we have professional studio space and professional video and sound equipment. I'm in one of our studio spaces right now using it. We have 3D printers, we have sewing machines, we have all kinds of things that people can come in, learn to use, and then come back on their own and use anytime. And I'll circle back around to the expertise piece. The thing that's really nice about this is that there's always somebody here to help. Our latest addition is our seed library. So if you're starting a garden in Buffalo and you want some seeds, you can come get them from us. So one thing that I love about these non-traditional resources is that they support both career and recreational interests for youth. And it's the sort of thing that when I'm talking to youth, and there's a kid whose eyes have kind of glazed for most of my presentation, when I start talking about these things, people get really excited. So I like to talk about them. Next. Okay, partnering with your public library. I encourage you to talk to your local librarian about your goals. What is it you are trying to accomplish with your group of youth? And encourage students also to ask us questions. That's the thing, is that there's a lot of expertise in libraries, and I think that youth and people in general often don't know that they can ask us questions. So, and it can be anything. So if you have a teenager who loves their D&D group in high school and they're going to lose that once they graduate, maybe their public library already has a group they can join. And if not, it's something that they can create. And this is what I love about public libraries, that we have the ability to meet people where they are. We just need to know where that is. Next.
As Maria mentioned and sort of touched on in her previous slide, when young people leave high school, they're leaving behind more than just their classes. They're leaving behind their clubs, their dances, their school spirit activities, and sometimes even their friends. This, along with a lack of funds that can be endemic to the early adult experience, can lead young people to detach themselves from their community and fall victim to the quiet epidemic of loneliness. It's not something we often think about, but loneliness has been recognized as having severe negative health effects, both mentally and physically. While there can be a lot of great free and low-cost activities for those who choose to attend college, not everyone goes to college, and even if they do go to college, everyone eventually graduates. It's important that we encourage our students to explore off campus and to build positive connections with their community. Next. Next, please. To give you some ideas of what sort of activities we can promote in our libraries, here are some of the ideas that I came up with. Shakespeare in the Park, one of the largest free Shakespeare festivals, is right here in Buffalo. First Fridays, which gives free access to the art museum, and there are other free museum days. Public library events are great. It's like for young people who have young children or young siblings, do some cross promotion. The Allentown Art Festival. Even if you can't purchase any art, it doesn't cost anything to look. It's like there are wonderful hiking and walking paths in the parks in our area. And there are ethnic celebrations and affinity group celebrations like Juneteenth, Dingus Day, the Italian Heritage Festival, Gay Pride Parade. And when you promote these events, be sure to remind young people that even if they don't necessarily belong to a given affinity or ethnic group, that doesn't mean they can't join in on the celebration. Everybody enjoys good food and music. There are a list of other suggestions on your toolkit that you will be getting, but most of them are based out of Buffalo City. You might be from a smaller, more rural community with fewer public events, and that's okay. Even the smallest towns have fireworks on the 4th of July or a garage sale day. If there are events in your area that are too expensive for young people to participate in, we can make a point of making local restaurants, theaters, and organization tickets rewards for trivia nights or drawings instead of using the ubiquitous Amazon gift card. In this way, we can encourage our young people to socialize with each other, reach out to those who share similar interests, and get to know their neighbors in ways they otherwise might not have a chance to. Next.
Part of being an adult means learning how to be self-sufficient. While there's nothing wrong with asking for help as an adult, another part of being an adult is learning self-sufficiency. How to care for yourself physically, mentally, and fiscally. We often assume that young people learn the skills needed to be independent adults from their parents or guardians. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. There are children of immigrants whose families may be unsure of how to properly navigate the systems of their new home country. There are foster children whose experience may have led to them having fragmented or incorrect information on how to care for themselves. Even some of the most attentive parents sometimes lack the specific knowledge or the willingness to teach their children vital life skills. We as librarians can step in and fill these knowledge gaps to allow our young people to develop proper self-sufficiency.
One of the newer buzzwords in public education is social emotional learning. While at Fillmore, I was blessed to work under an administration that placed a strong emphasis on teaching us to be trauma-focused teachers. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network reports that 25% of children can experience trauma by the age of 16. That means 1 in 4 of your students have experienced some type of trauma, and they're dealing with that every day. Now, in some areas, we may see higher levels of trauma, and in some, hopefully, we see lower levels. But we see this growing trend in the number of school counselors and social workers that are present in our public schools today. So how can this relate to transitioning into adulthood? Well, as a school librarian, we are often an important place they begin social emotional learning. Developing a curriculum in the library that addresses these needs is important to help these and all students better prepare for adulthood. As a library media specialist, we can begin by partnering with the school's counseling team to develop a curriculum that addresses the needs of our students. Knowing the specific issues within our student body can help us to better develop a collection to meet their needs. Next. Some ways we can do this include teaching tolerance, teamwork, and character traits. And adding books to our collections for these specific issues will help everyone in our building. At Fillmore, we began a program a few years ago where the entire school would focus on a certain character trait each quarter. I would purchase books specific to that trait and send a bibliography of these books to counselors and teachers. And also, I set up collections in Destiny so students could find them more easily. I featured the titles and displays inside the library, and it was very successful. On a regular basis, I had the school social worker or counselors, as well as teachers, looking for specific titles to work and focus on problems that they were seeing within their students. Other ways I developed this in the library were to create projects where students chose age-appropriate books for younger readers and made videos for them to watch. Team building activities where students were grouped outside of their normal social circles. So they had to learn to work with other personalities and other levels of workers. Reading books to each other based on their own particular interests so their peers could learn more about them. One in particular, and you'll see in the picture on the right, is I enjoyed Pajama Day just like my students did at school. And this was during Read Across America Week. You see in the picture that all of the students, except for one, is inside the circle and I'm reading to them. I did not make a fuss about him not wanting to be in the circle. This young man is on the autism spectrum and really did not like to be that close to others, but he was fully engaged and participated in the activity with us, just in his own way. So this taught him that it's okay to be different. It taught me that it's okay to not argue about things. And it taught the other students that, you know what, he's listening, he's paying attention just like we are. He's just doing it in his own way. So that was a pretty successful event. Upon re-entry to our school, I even purchased a collection of books specific to the COVID-19 for students. This was so they could better understand all the restrictions that were in place. It was a very heavily circulated collection, and it was perfect for our needs when we came back to school. Next.
Like the social emotional tools that Dani just described for school libraries, academic libraries can also play a role in helping students, especially first-year college students, become more self-sufficient in terms of their mental health. Helping these students take care of their mental health is important because, as Allison mentioned earlier, the high school to college transition can be difficult. Students must adjust to new people, an unfamiliar environment, a diverse set of academic expectations, and many are surprised to find how different the culture of higher education is from that of high school. And because students have greater autonomy and responsibility, they're exposed to greater academic and personal stressors that can impact their mental health. On top of this is the fact that many mental health issues have their onset before age 21, and therefore college students are considered high risk because of their age. And as we all know, the pandemic also exacerbated mental health distress amongst everyone, including our students. The good news is that COVID has shown a spotlight on mental health and raised awareness. Student needs are being addressed. For example, those of us from SUNY may have heard the recent announcement of plans to expand mental health services for students across all 64 of our campuses. The bad news is that many students don't seek help. They may be unaware of how to navigate their mental health when stressors interfere with their education, or they may be afraid to reach out because of the stigma associated with mental health difficulties. And stigma in particular is a significant barrier to students seeking help. However, libraries are in a prime position to support mental health initiatives. Since we are at the crossroads of the campus, we see a lot of students. The library has always been a service point, but it is evolving into a care point as well. Next. Here are some ideas of how we can help increase awareness, reduce stigma surrounding mental health, and connect as allies with students. First, trainings for library staff and students. There are lots of great trainings. One I'd like to highlight is called QPR, Question, Persuade, and Refer Suicide Prevention Training, which, like CPR, can save lives. Buffalo State recently experienced a tragic event with the suicide of one of our students. Subsequently, the Buffalo State community was asked to complete QPR training, and I encourage everyone to do so as well. Another online training, this one specifically for library staff, is called Caring for the Mind, Providing Mental Health Information at Your Library. And it covers how to recognize, interact with, and provide service to individuals in mental distress. There are other types of programs such as mindfulness trainings for stress reduction. I've included listings of some of these in our toolkit, and you can look for other lectures and trainings for library best practices addressing social service needs of your student patrons. Of course, upgrading print and online resources through focused collection development, the creation of subject guides and other materials, and offering pamphlets on a variety of mental health topics. We can make resources more easily accessible and help educate students. So for collections, you can ask for input about your library's dedicated mental health collection to ensure resources are accurate, current, and comprehensive. And make sure your collection represents the diversity of your students. Subject guides can include content such as information on types of anxiety and depressive disorders, lists of ebooks about mental health, young adult fiction novels that involve mental health through character experiences, lists of documentaries about mental health, and access to ebook and audiobook databases. You can also offer pamphlets and other materials that promote mental health services and resources both on campus and locally, and provide information on touchy topics so that students can freely take these materials without feeling exposed. There are many organizations listed in the toolkit which provide free mental health related pamphlets, brochures, fact sheets, and other educational materials. Outreach events. These can include de-stressor activities, which our library has offered, such as having therapy dogs in the library or providing coloring books, art supplies, games during finals. And the library can host formal presentations too. For example, right before the campus closed due to the pandemic, Butler Library and Student Accessibility Services at Buffalo State partnered to host a well-received film screening of a film on, as it turned out, the timely topic of anxiety. A panel discussion with community members dealing with different types of anxiety followed the screening. Another idea would be to ask psychologists or other professionals from the community to give talks in the library or facilitate groups on campus. And in addition, as librarians and teachers, we can give students the information literacy skills they need to take control of their situations rather than blindly, Googling. Students can learn how to effectively find and evaluate information to promote their own well-being and self-efficacy. Next. Visuals in the form of prominent book displays and eye-catching and encouraging posters on mental health topics are another way we can raise awareness and counteract stigma. Libraries can celebrate Mental Health Month each May, and the National Network of Libraries of Medicine has book club kits and a selection guide to help promote this program. There's also World Mental Health Day each October 10th, but we can make our mental health resources more visible throughout the year. Spaces. Lastly, libraries are safe spaces where students should feel comfortable and calm. Many libraries are creating meditation rooms for student and staff use. If securing private areas like this isn't possible, just providing welcoming spaces in the library where students can decompress and connect with others is important. And though it's difficult to control noise, make sure to have dedicated quiet spaces as well. Next. Another important area where we can help students become more self-sufficient and successful is financial literacy. A growing number of educators believe that financial literacy is just as important as information literacy, especially for first-year college students who may be beginning to make significant financial decisions on their own. Like information literacy, financial literacy skills are essential for success. Unfortunately, many students lack the knowledge to make sound financial decisions. A recent study found that only about 1/3 of college students have prior financial education. So many students are not learning these skills either at home or at school. But by introducing financial literacy skills during the first year or before, we provide students with the opportunity to develop good habits early on, to establish or build credit in a financially responsible way. And here are some things that librarians can do to develop financial literacy. Next. We can build or bolster dedicated book collections with up-to-date financial literacy sources of interest to students. Again, we can create subject guides and refer students to existing programs for financial literacy education. The University of Buffalo's financial literacy program and SUNY Smart Track financial education course are just 2 examples of many to be found in our toolkit. Celebrate Money Smart Week at your library. This is a national initiative between the American Library Association and the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago that provides extensive financial literacy programming and related fun activities, and it's usually offered in April. Participate in first-year program collaborations, such as orientations or first-year seminar classes to introduce financial literacy resources to these students. Or take this a step further and get involved in developing financial literacy programs on your campus. Offer workshops and presentations. Invite campus financial aid staff or professionals from the community to speak to students. For example, I've invited a financial expert to present to my classes each semester while teaching our first-year experience course at Buffalo State. And we know that attracting students to activities and programs can be challenging. So to help reel them in, we have offered incentives such as the ever popular ploy of providing refreshments. We know that students love free food. Freebie promotional products such as earbuds, travel umbrellas in the Bengal orange school color with Butler Library has you covered printed on them. Even more expensive techie drawing prizes such as iPods. Again, please check our toolkit where there is a listing of several organizations that provide free publications, free financial publications, and educator resources. Next.
Lastly, one of the most important parts of being an adult is recognizing your responsibility towards others. While some of our young people may have been caring for themselves and their families for much of their lives, others may have not had the same experiences. As we've mentioned before, many young people are eager to impact the world around them in a positive way. However, due to a lack of knowledge or experience, they may not know where to start. So librarians can help provide them with the information and tools necessary to help them give back to their community in effective ways. Next.
Part of the transition from high school to full adulthood is becoming a fully enfranchised citizen. You turn 18 and suddenly politics isn't something only the adults need to worry about, it becomes something you need to worry about. Some young people find this stage intimidating and that their education up to this point has left them unprepared to fully participate in public life. Their families may see talking about politics as impolite, or as they've grown, they may find their own political views no longer match up with their caregivers. So they avoid voting or participating in politics altogether. As a result, young people's voices are muted in government. The year 2020 was one of the largest election years in history, yet only 45% of young people participated in the general election. That's not even half. We as librarians can help encourage young people to take their place in civic life and fully participate in our democratic processes. We can start by assisting voters in registration and encouraging young people to participate in all elections, federal, state, and local. And there are some other suggestions that we have to help out, and some of them you may already be doing at your library, but it's always worth trying to do a little bit more than the basics when possible. Next. The simplest thing we can do is, as I said before, provide voter registration forms to our patrons and stamps so they can mail them into the library. Also, we can provide basic training to all library staff to help patrons understand how to fill out their voter forms and answer basic questions about the voting process. We had a voter registration day at my library, which was an academic library, and I offered candy in exchange for either filling out a voter registration form, or if they were already registered to vote, filling out a card with the address of their place of voting so they would remember exactly where they had to go to vote. We can host town halls or conversations with local political groups or civic groups in safe but brave areas. Brave area is a place where people can speak their minds honestly, but not disrespectfully or hurtfully to others. We live in a highly polarized time where it's getting harder for us to break out of our self-imposed echo chambers. And by offering young people a chance to listen and speak openly and honestly, we can break down partisan walls and encourage a culture of listening and empathy. We can post election dates, deadlines for voter registration, and provide unbiased information about who is running and what is being voted on, both in our physical spaces and online. We can provide information on how to run for local office and the deadlines to send in paperwork for running for office. While you need to be 30 years old to run for president or governor, you only need to be 18 to run for state senator or state assembly. Now, most 18-year-olds are probably not going to be interested in running for office straight out of high school, but letting students know the option is available and what steps they need to take to build up their resume could increase their interest in politics and eventually lead to a political career when they get older. And finally, we can provide information on volunteering as poll workers. As we know, there are places throughout the country that are plagued with long wait times to vote. One of the causes of this is a lack of poll workers, which has been a problem long before COVID, and COVID has made it worse by making it difficult for the people who usually volunteer as poll workers, that is the elderly, to participate. Poll workers promote democracy by setting up voting equipment, signing in voters, and they also get paid for training in each day of work. So this is a great opportunity for young people to build their resumes while getting involved in local democracy. Making voting a habit at an early age will hopefully lead to our young people being more civically engaged as they get older, and bonus could also lead to more voters who support the library in the future. Next. Now, everything I've talked about up until this point has to do with civical involvement through political parties. Now, not everybody feels comfortable with this kind of political involvement, and for those people, there are many other volunteer opportunities where they can work directly on issues either locally or nationally. To find appropriate volunteer opportunities for your young people who use your library, you need to connect with people who have opportunities and gather data. What issues, and gather data both from them and from your young people. What issues are important to young people in your community, and what organizations exist to help address those needs? Hold surveys, talk to young people, use those town halls we talked about to discover what young people want to work on. We can provide great volunteer opportunities, but if they don't match our population's interests, they will never participate. And then invite local organizations looking for volunteers to present in your libraries. Let them make their pitch to young people why they should spend time volunteering with them. I provided a list of volunteer opportunities in the Buffalo area in your toolkit, and if you live outside the Buffalo area, you should try to look for more local opportunities. Next. Some things to keep in mind when looking at volunteer opportunities to promote. If you are an academic or a school library, don't get stuck in your academic bubble. It's easy to focus all your volunteer efforts on improving and supporting the school, and that's okay, but remember, our students are going to graduate someday, and we want them to have connections outside the school walls. Be sure to look for opportunities that allow the community to connect with the school and vice versa. And second, be flexible and inclusive in your volunteer opportunities. Not everyone can travel to volunteer sites. Our young people have numerous responsibilities, even outside of school and work. Online volunteer opportunities give young people the opportunity to participate in volunteering without having to worry about being at a specific time or place. They can also be included on resumes just like any other volunteer opportunity. I myself have included my online volunteer work on my CV, and it has gotten me to have employers look at me more than once. I have a list of online volunteer opportunities in the toolkit, but please, once again, try to find online opportunities that best match the interests of your local community. Next.
As Carli mentioned earlier, many children are not taught certain things at home, either because their parents are unwilling or incapable of teaching them. But even the best parents can overlook some seemingly basic life skills. I often like to tell a funny story about my son, who is pictured here with his family. He's now a father and working toward his engineering degree. He's an exceptionally bright young man and has always excelled in school with very little effort. However, when he went away to college at age 18, he earned a speeding ticket. He mailed in the payment for the ticket and couldn't understand why he kept getting the envelope back. After the third time, he called me and asked why it kept happening. After he sent me a picture of the envelope, I gave myself a swift face palm. He had addressed the payment to himself. I assumed he knew how to address an envelope because I knew they learned it in school, and he had, in second grade. Apparently, they never reviewed it again, and this is true for many skills. Many parents will ask, why don't they learn it in school? Well, oftentimes they do, but only briefly. The most correct response, however, is that schools just don't always have time. Between standards and state testing, teachers are limited, and with students choosing electives based on academic interest, taking college classes, and VOTEC students who will only receive core content area classes, there is no time in a student's schedule, and this is where the library can help. Next. Libraries can fill these gaps. Whether you set up special workshops or makerspace centers, students will benefit from learning some basic life skills, especially if they get a chance to have some hands-on time. Some examples of the skills learned in my library include construction, sustainability projects, fun science experiments, fundraising for community service projects, and creating clubs and organizations. On the left, you see fifth grade students reading blueprints of the school in order to create a 3D replica. Since I had a basic knowledge of how to read blueprints due to my stepfather being a construction worker, I was able to pass that on to them. In the middle photo, I show a second grade student who is ordering books from the library to have delivered to her later in the day. I actually taught all of my students from first grade up how to do that, so now online ordering will be the norm. And in the last photo, you see sixth grade students working on a project where they are preserving raw eggs straight from my chickens. They learn skills such as measuring, cracking eggs, using pickling lime, and canning. I am one of those people who has a lot of interests, so many of these ideas were able to be taught by me. Others I had to learn first before I could teach them. And believe me, I learned a lot when my students would give me a suggestion for a project they wanted to do. But don't be afraid to reach out to others in your district or community to help teach some of these skills to your students. But make sure that they are hands-on skills. Students already receive enough lecture-style teaching. Next.
Everyone's talked about the toolkit as we were presenting, so I'm not sure if it's available in the chat. It will be available afterwards. There's information from everyone who spoke and different links and things that you can go to for everything that we've talked about today. Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. We've had a few questions pop up in the Q&A. First question, I think, came in during the first part of the presentation. How many seniors are there in your graduating class? Carli, I think that was for you.
Unfortunately, we didn't get to take all the seniors. Ours are split, which is why I find the library is where you can connect. Our graduating classes are probably about 80 students. but this was only one teacher who agreed to take her students. And so we went from there. So it could be that you only take a portion of them, but if you could get all of them at some point, we had also talked about, I only got to do it once because of COVID. But they talked about maybe doing it in like earlier in the school year or at the end. It could vary when you take students and maybe which classes they're in.
That would be great. I hope you're able to do that in the beginning of the year. I have another question specifically for Carli. There's a great idea, and ice cream is a great recruitment strategy. How else did you pull in participants? And they have a second part of the question in the chat, which I think you might have answered during your presentation, but do you have ideas about how to adapt this to a larger non-walkable district encompassing multiple municipalities?
I think it was Maria who talked about it too, is that you can't, some schools, this might not work. I mean, we're a small district. We were able to walk to each place. Allison, I think maybe you touched upon this too, that, you just have to, you might have to be creative, and it might be through Zoom, and maybe they do a walking tour, but it's online. Maybe you physically go and do a walking tour and then share that information with your students. I know busing can be an issue and things like that. So it's just thinking outside the box and being creative is what I would say. Like, this wouldn't work. And that's how we all came together. We're like, oh, that's good. But for me, I could see it working like this, or these are the ideas I have. So I think all of us were hoping that we would just kind of share ideas we've done, and you can go, oh, well, that's cool, but what about this? Or could I do that? Just getting that creativity and just knowing that the students, especially, Dani, like you said, hands-on. If they can get out there, if they can see the place, if they can experience the public library. Maria said something about just checking out the website, maybe. I mean, just knowing that there's things available to them. Maybe your activity could be map questing, or I don't know, did that just age me? Using Google Maps to, where can I find it? And then when they're on their own, they could find the libraries.
Yeah, it's not limited to the examples that you shared in your presentation. I even saw suggestions in the chat about different things to try. Someone shared the volunteer fireman recruitment that libraries can partner with. So there are a lot of options out there. It just depends on your community. We have a couple.
And our Dani's a volunteer fire person. She's done that. But like I said, and I don't know if you heard that, but when I have talked to groups outside of school, they're like, how do you get into a school? Because we've tried and we don't know how to get in, or who to talk to, or who to ask, because I think they're turned away a lot. So I think if you're encouraging, if you can be creative and say, hey, I've got a ton of ideas, but like, let's do like a recruitment day or a volunteer day. And like you said, the volunteer fire company comes in, like, I'm sure they would love that given the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We have a couple more questions. For students who are going off to college, what do you recommend focusing on to stress the importance that the public library can still have in their lives, even if they won't be living at home all the time?
Okay, so I'm going to add one thing onto what Carli said about somebody's question about, what if we can't do a walking tour? What if things are too big? Sometimes schools will tag team where they will go down to City Hall and they'll come up to the library. So this is a good thing to do too, where if somebody, because it's so hard to get busing in those resources, right? I understand that. So sometimes if schools are going to look at something else, we can be part of that tour. So sometimes if you can just chunk it out in ways like that. And then once you get to the public library, we can even talk about some of those things if you're not able to get out to them, right? And then, we can bring our resources, talk about subject guides. And this is where you would find these things when you're not in this building. So there's ways to do it. And like Carli's saying, it might not be exactly how she did it, but there's lots of different ways to be creative around that. So emphasizing public libraries when kids go off to college. So whether kids are staying at home and using a library that they're used to, or if they're going out to other places, what I like to remind people is you can often get a library card if you are a student living somewhere else, not permanently, but as a student. But even without that, most libraries, you can do almost anything in a library without a library card. you know, and again, it depends on your library, but most of the time that library card is really only required to check out materials. So there are lots of things that people can participate in the public library. Generally, because if students are in school and they're learning lots of things, I try to emphasize the recreational things, right? We have books, we have groups. And something that's really important to know, public libraries often don't have a lot of specific programming for emerging adults, right? People who are just in their early 20s. And that is not because we don't want to. That is often because we don't have enough staffing. But I encourage people to talk about that at the library. Ask if that kind of programming exists. If somebody just says no to you, I encourage people, ask somebody else, right? Because they are answering the question. They're saying, no, we don't have it. But sometimes ask for the person who does teen programming. That's often your person who's going to have the best knowledge about these things. And if you ask for it, often that's a good way to get it, right? If you ask for it, then I can make the argument as the teen librarian that we need more programs for older teens. So that helps me. And lastly, even if staff can't do that, oftentimes as a young adult, you can start things at the library, right? And the librarians can help you do that. So the great thing about the public library is it really is for the people. It can be anything you want it to be. So be really vocal and don't be turned off if one person tells you no. Be persistent.
And I say, look around your school, like Dani talked about the social workers in your school, but the resource officer. We had him talk to seniors about on-campus safety, because my little country bumpkins are not used to having to worry about, you know, like how to use an Uber or, you know, any of that safety. I mean, they've never probably been anywhere where they've had to do any of those things. So I think just thinking about what your students might need.
That was great. Does anyone else have any comments they want to add to that?
No, I would
What
say
is-
a lot of what Maria said is true in the school, in the public school too. You know, I've had students, they wanted a craft club. So they went to the principal. I said, if you want this, you're going to have to do it. Well, then they told the principal that I would advise it without asking me about it. But of course, I couldn't tell them no because I love them. But they started a craft club. I had other girls who did, they raised over $400 for a homeless shelter in our area and took donations. And it was all me saying, okay, here's the idea. I will help you with the people you need to talk to, but you're going to have to get the permission to do this. So those students being able to advocate for themselves and step up. These are 4th and 5th and 6th grade students. These weren't older teens. These were younger kids. Those skills, those leadership skills and organizational skills are going to go with them for forever. And I was more than happy to promote that with them. So like Maria said, you know, ask for it and you might get it. You never know.
I've
And-
also had the, oh, sorry, Maria. Go
Oh,
ahead.
no, I was just going to say youth. If youth or patrons ask for things, they're more likely to get them, right? So yes, always advocate for people to speak up. I'm sorry, go ahead, Carli.
I was just going to say, we also have a technology teacher, and I said, wouldn't it be a cool thing to have him show the students how to change a tire? Not that that necessarily might stick in their brain, but then if they were to YouTube changing a tire, they would have already physically seen it and then would be able to, using that second instruction. There's just so many ideas, you know, for youth and just for all of us, really.
Just one more question. The next session, before I ask the next question, the next session will be at 11 a.m. Digital History with Timeline JS. And you can access the meeting from the Pillars program, which Susan has been putting into the chat. Last question. Are there any resources or programming ideas available for social emotional learning in the public library?
Yeah, so again, this will depend on your library system and what's happening. But this is one of the main focuses I have in all my teen programming. So we have a teen advisory group, teenagers who help us decide what the library should be doing for teenagers, right? And there's a lot of decision making in that group. There's a lot of learning to work as a team. There's a lot of making sure you're doing your part. So we certainly do that in our tag. I have a book group, and we also, same sorts of thing. We use the book as a touch point, then to talk about all kinds of things in our own lives and how we're feeling about things. And we did that as a request. They wanted a group where they could talk about issues. And so we made it into a book group to take the pressure off a little bit, right? We're talking about this character, but then you can talk about yourself if you would like. And also, so I've been in this position for 5 years, and a lot of my teenagers are starting to age out of the programming and they don't want to go, which is great. It's a great problem to have. So we've started talking about, like Carli and Dani have said, how are you going to advocate for us to continue this programming, right? And so I'm kind of gearing them up in the next few months so that we can go to our administration and say, we have these teenagers that need an older group for themselves. You know, how can we make that happen? And some of that will be about them making it happen, right? They're going to lead it a little bit more. I'm just kind of there in the background. But yeah, so a lot of these things happen in teen programming. The goal is really to have fun and to learn things, but really to support that social emotional learning and growth that teenagers need, and even into early adulthood, right?
Another program that public libraries can participate in is the Human Library. We've done it at my academic library, and it's very easy to transfer to a public library where you can have individuals from the community come and act as books and talk about their life experience. And this life experience can be anything from their experience as a new immigrant to someone who's experienced homelessness, to someone who is of a different religion, someone who has experienced a mental health crisis. It's like these things are all good for social emotional learning, as it encourages young people to look outside themselves, see other people, empathize with them, and also have those somewhat scary conversations with people that they may have been taught to be nervous about or afraid of. And I think it's especially important if you could find someone who's willing to talk about their mental health issues with people, to help people recognize that when I took psychology, we were told if you've had depression, you've had essentially the common cold of psychology, but depression is not always shown as that in media. It's often over dramatized, over romanticized. So it's important to break down the stigma and recognize, yes, this is a condition, this is an illness, but it's not the end of the world. Also, it's like this is something that people survive, and this is something that people live with. And eventually this will hopefully, for those who might also be experiencing mental health issues, they will recognize the symptoms in themselves and sort of start to learn about how others manage and how they can start to manage their own emotions.
Thank you so much. We are out of time. Thank you all for a great discussion and a great presentation. And thank you all attendees for attending this session. Again, the next presentation will be Digital History with Timeline.js, and you can access the meeting from the Pillars program, which Susan has been sharing the link to in the chat. It is at 11 a.m., which is right now. You can also utilize the PDF link if the website is not working for you. Have a great day, everyone.